It's been a long year. After this year, perhaps it's easier to imagine what the world was like 2,000 years ago. It was a world divided into the conquerors and the oppressed. It was a world where the bias or impulse or pride of a strongman ruler determined the fate of ordinary people, sometimes forcing them, in the face of certain death, to flee to foreign lands as refugees. It was a world that ignored the powerless and fawned at the throne of power. As we saw the images and tweets and Facebook posts of the bombings in Syria, perhaps we remembered how many times this weary world has witnessed similar events. Perhaps we remembered that Jesus as a baby was a refugee fleeing from persecution. This year, as we heard from leaders who announced that they would no longer accept refugees in their territory, perhaps we remembered the generous innkeeper who sheltered a mother about to give birth. As we've watched the spectacle of wealth and ego that has dominated our nation's news this past year, perhaps we found our times resonating with those times long ago when wealth was power and might made right. And perhaps we felt sadness or despair or frustration or anger. I imagine that Joseph and Mary, fleeing their homeland with their babe in arms, felt all of those things. Here's what I know. They came back. Joseph and Mary and their baby came back to Judea. They came back to Nazareth. They made a life, the ordinary, courageous life of people who have no power except the power to learn, the power to create, the power to love. And from that little backwater in an occupied country, there rose a teacher whose ideas were so remarkable, so profound, that they inspired generations of people all over the world. These ideas were grounded in Jewish teachings, but accessible to everyone. Love your neighbor. Love your enemies. You are the light of the world. The light of the world. At the time, it was a common expression in Jewish thought. Usually the light of the world referred to God. Sometimes it meant the Torah. Sometimes it meant the whole tribe of Israel, whose unique connection to God was a light in a world of darkness. But Jesus, Yeshua, told ordinary people, you are the light of the world. It was something he understood in his bones. He grew up with parents who faced terror and homelessness and exile, parents who survived all of that to recover and then to thrive in an ordinary life, an ordinary, loving, resilient life that by word and deed guided the child whose birth we celebrate tonight. Jesus understood that ordinary people light the world. Yet when he said ordinary people, and of course he meant poor people, because at the time 90% of the world's people were poor. When he said to these ordinary people, you are the light of the world, he was saying something completely new. You are the light of the world. This idea would have startled most people. It would have enraged the priests as blasphemy. it would also have given ordinary people a new way to see themselves as the light of the world, the light of the whole world. Not the pompous leaders, not the well-armed military, not the wealthiest of 1%, but the ordinary people, you. You are the light of the world. I might be inclined to dismiss this whole notion, but then there's Jesus, who came from less promising circumstances than most people in this room today. In fact, less promising circumstances than most people in the world today. And 2,000 years later, we celebrate his birthday and his message of love and hope and peace. And then there's us, the light of the world. Does that seem a lot to expect in these days when many of us struggle to find hope? It's not too much. I say firmly and with conviction, with evidence-based conviction, that there is reason to hope. It may seem sometimes as if the world is falling back into all the wicked ways of long ago, but that's just not true. Here's the long view, the big picture. Humanity on earth has been rising for 4.5 billion years, and we're still rising. For millennia, and as recently as 200 years ago, 90% of the world's population lived in poverty, and today, only 10% live in poverty. For millennia, and as recently as 200 years ago, less than 10% of the world's people could read, and today, 85% are literate. For millennia, and as recently as 200 years ago, about half, 50% of all children born died before the age of 5. Today, worldwide child mortality is less than 5%. None of these changes came about because of a great enlightened monarch who decreed that it would be so. None of them. The world has changed because ordinary people living ordinary lives have found ways to be the light they wish to see in the world. Ordinary people found their power, the power to learn, the power to create, the power to love. With these gifts, every person can make a difference. Do we search for purpose and meaning in life? Do we wonder sometimes how we can carry on without sliding into despair? Be the light. Be the light. Find a way each day to make a small difference. Keep an eye out for ways to make a big difference. And love one another, even strangers, even enemies. Because it's just as Jesus said. The world is there, our world. Bring it hope. Light it up.
Will you be with me now in a spirit of meditation, reflection, and prayer? I invite you to close your eyes if that's comfortable for you, or perhaps just let your gaze be soft. O holy night, the stars are brightly shining. Our hearts are full, and once again we resolve to be the people of peace we long to be. In this place of peace, when we set down our struggles, our burdens, our failures, and rest in the holy light and the sacred dark. On this night which carries the joy and the love and the yearnings of our hearts, on this night the stars shine brightly overhead. We lift our faces to that distant light, born of countless stars, impossibly far from us, and somehow very near. Light in the darkness, and the vast, rich, enfolding darkness itself, darkness that holds us, promising silence and rest. It speaks to us of peace and hope and love, and of a deep and splendid truth beyond joy and sorrow, a truth bigger than anything for which we have no words, only the sudden catch of the breath, the tears that come without warning, the swelling of the heart, the yearning without name that calls us again and again to lift our faces to the holy light and the sacred dark, to dwell in mystery, to walk in peace, to make of ourselves a light for the world. Amen.